Hello there, I'm Shelby Williams coming at you with another episode of the Plano Truth. We're coming off the heels of Super Tuesday. Now, it looked as though heading into Super Tuesday, Democrat presidential candidate Bernie Sanders could run away with it. Joe Biden's firewall that he proclaimed in South Carolina held up, and now we've got a two-horse race. It's not the race anybody would have predicted several months ago, but it's between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. This is very significant. Now, first, it's worth noting that the lines on Super Tuesday, at least in Plano, at many of our polling locations, had very long lines for Democrat primary voting, but much shorter lines for Republican primary voting. A lot of people have made a lot of speculation about this, but it's to be expected. Primary votes are driven by who's at the top of the ticket. And the reality is that most voters don't know who's on the ballot, down ballot from the president and U.S. Senate races. In this case, President Trump has no real competition on the U.S. ticket. Neither did John Cornyn. So that's what drove the Republican turnout, which is a token vote. On the Democrat side, however, a knife fight erupted several weeks ago for the presidential nomination. And so there was a lot of reason to go out and some fair differentiation between the top candidates. A lot of the focus has been on Bernie Sanders, and rightly so. So this leads to this episode's topic. What's so bad about communism? This is a question I was asked by a friend about 20 years ago. What's so bad about communism? Now, first, we have to discuss the actual definition of the word. There's socialism and there's communism. It is also worth noting that Marx and Engels, Marx, the author of the Communist Manifesto, used the words socialism and communism pretty interchangeably. They didn't mean very different things. So the actual dictionary definition of the words socialism, is the state ownership of the means of production. Now you can extrapolate from this to mean state control of the means of production, which amounts to the same thing. Communism, by very minor contrast, is public or common ownership, hence the word communism, of the means of production. However, if you try to implement that philosophy in a group more than about 10, 20 people, then you need a steward of the means of production, which is invariably the state. Hence, in any jurisdiction, in any government of any size, communism and socialism really mean the same thing. However, in the past decade or so, particularly since President Trump took office and everybody just came out of the socialist closet, there's been a lot of efforts to put lipstick on the pig. And as you all know, you can't put lipstick on a pig because it's a pig. Otherwise, you've just got a pig with lipstick on it. So calling it democratic socialist or socialist rather than communist doesn't change the nature of what we're discussing. And what we are discussing is a governmental economic system, which, and this is why communism is bad, it's an ideology which says it's okay to take from this person or this group of people for what I deem to be the best good. Think about that. Such an ideology knows no boundaries, no borders, and no restraints. Human beings have a remarkable capability to self-justify, to say, I'm doing this for the right reasons, therefore it's okay. That's why we had the Cold War. That's why we fought proxy wars throughout the 50s and 60s and 70s against communist expansion globally, because communism sought to expand by force. That's what happened at the end of World War II. The entire segment of Eastern Europe was brought under Soviet control. Communist expansion in Asia and in Latin and South America. This is why we fought it. Now, when you bring it up, when you say this has failed spectacularly wherever it has been tried, the most recent example is Venezuela, which went from a few decades ago, the fourth wealthiest nation in the world, to a nation where people are literally eating dogs and cats and pigeons just to survive. That's what socialism/communism did. Now, why is it? It's because humans are involved. It's no more complicated than that. A system like that, placed in the hands of humans, is doomed to failure. The beauty of the American form of government in the U.S. Constitution is that our founding fathers recognized this. Even before Marx ever wrote the Communist Manifesto, they recognized that humans are completely fallible and that power corrupts. Hence Madison's famous quote, "If men were angels, then no government would be necessary." Totally true. But men aren't angels, and government is necessary. That's why our Constitution explicitly creates a system that restrains the capriciousness of man and the whimsy of man and women, if we want to be fair. So in terms of communism, and let's make no mistake, there is an excellent chance that a dyed-in-the-wool communist is going to be the Democrat nominee for president of the United States. How did we get here? Seriously, how did we get here? It's because people don't truly understand what that represents. The current generation, a couple decades removed from the Cold War and the realities of communism, has no clue what it means. They either claim that countries like Norway and Denmark are the socialist model when they are no such thing. Norway and Denmark have capitalist economies with pretty heavy welfare states. That's not what socialism is, okay? So dressing yourself up as a democratic socialist or a socialist, if what you really mean is welfare state, then just say so. Be honest about it. Otherwise, you've got a whole generation that thinks, hey, that's a pretty good idea. But they dress it up with the promise of free stuff, free college, free housing, free whatever, free healthcare. Nothing is free. It is always paid for by somebody, which leads to the reality. The whole foundation of Marxism, socialism, communism, however you want to term it, it's all the same thing, is rooted in one of the 7 deadly sins, envy. That's all it is. Vladimir Lenin appealed, and Marx appealed to class envy. Wherever it is pushed, Hugo Chavez appealed to class envy. All of the socialist, communist revolutions that we have seen throughout the world in the past couple decades, decade and a half really, have been based on class envy. And I've got a secret for you. It's not so much a secret, but I'm going to author several articles about this over the coming months in the lead up to the presidential election, how money works. We hear Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and others proclaim that X% of the world's wealth is controlled by Y% of billionaires. Newsflash, wealth is not controlled, it's created. Each and every one of us has the power to create new wealth. It is not a static commodity. There is not a fixed amount of wealth in the world for which we all have to fight. Wealth is created. It's the product of human effort and ingenuity. No, Jeff Bezos, he's the one who's most recently held up as the root of all evil. Well, Mike Bloomberg took center stage recently, but they didn't take your money. They didn't take anybody's money. It was given to them in voluntary transactions. They created wealth by raising the standard of living collectively across this planet. That's the secret to wealth. And communism, socialism, Marxism is utterly destructive of that creative capability of humankind. And that's what happened. For much of human history, that power to create wealth was suppressed through feudal systems, dictatorships, a variety of governmental systems that accrued power to the top and suppressed everybody at the bottom. Until the Enlightenment period and free markets, capitalist markets, unleashed the power of wealth globally. And it really took off in the United States because people were able to capitalize on that. Note the word, capitalize. That's what you can do. That's what I can do. That's what we all can do. Until and unless we are subject to a socialist government.
then it's all over. Stay tuned. I'm going to come back at you with more and more articles. Thank you very much. I'm Shelby Williams, Plano City, Texas.